Maybe I won't next time.
Okay, we have a quorum. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Amy Oliver,
Present, online.
Dennis Kuhn,
Here.
Craig Barron, Robert East, Buell Januzzi,
Here.
Daniel Slater,
Present.
Alex Zimmerman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, let's move on to our agenda. And we're going to item number 2, which is approval of minutes, legal action report from May 7th of 2025. And I think Clayton emailed that out to everybody. So we need to review that, and we would need a motion for approval.
Move to approve.
Second.
For the record, was that Buell as a first?
Yes, it was. Sorry, I'll start saying my name.
Thank you, appreciate it. And
Yes,
then
and sorry, Amy gave a second. Yes.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
So all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed? With none opposed, the motion passes unanimously. And with that, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is the subcommittee report. And I think I'll turn that over to Amy.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. So the subcommittee has met. This is Amy Oliver again, chair of the committee, also sitting on the subcommittee for those who are online. So the subcommittee has been meeting repeatedly in between every full meeting of this committee to go over all of the comments that we have received over the past 2 years as we have been working on this, and also looking at changes that we might be able to make to both simplify the code and also not just simplify it across the board, but also make it easier to use in both the commercial and residential consideration. One of the major things we are working on right now is the table, getting the table more in line with the, Dark Sky International table, but taking into consideration our special use cases and our special needs here in Arizona, as well as continuing to work on our definitions. So I do not believe we don't have a copy of that table draft ready for today. Is that correct?
No, we don't.
Okay.
And we-
I didn't think so because I know that Craig is working on that.
Let me interject and just say that we only
Yeah.
had a subcommittee meeting since our last full committee meeting. And we did make some progress there, particularly looking at an alternative residential table, which would provide a simpler prescriptive method, just saying how many lumens you have per site based on the size of your residential lot. And we don't have the final values arrived at, but I think the process looks like it would be encouraging. And so I'll just leave it at that.
I agree with that. I've been particularly encouraged by one of the big changes that we've made, which was just removing residential. Right now in the code as it sits, everything is in one table. But we have separated out residential from the rest of the table so that it's easier to find. And then also making those other simplifications for residential so that it's just easier to use across the board for anyone developing or upgrading in residential. And I think that that's going to make a very big difference.
Okay, do we have anything else on the subcommittee report?
I don't think so. We'll meet again when Craig gets back.
Great. Okay, we can move on to item 4 in the agenda, which is definitions. And Clayton, do you want to speak on that?
Absolutely. Thank you. This is Clayton with the city of Tucson. We at the city have been considering primarily the definition for residential and how it applies to the lighting code, the building code, and the zoning codes. We talked a bit about this last month. I will say that as the city moves forward with its middle housing amendments, that is going to have an impact. We are leaning towards a definition that essentially points a defining difference between the International Residential Code and the International Building Code as the difference between residential and commercial. That has been widely accepted in the past, but also the point comes up that the middle housing bill, House Bill 2721 from the state of Arizona, requires that cities allow up to 4 dwelling units on a single parcel without complying with commercial development standards. So that is what we're honing in on, okay, to make sure that we aren't inadvertently causing a disruption with the state legislature that's essentially protecting small developments of 4 units or less. So as it stands right now, I would recommend that, we continue to assume that residential in the terms of the outdoor lighting code will primarily point to the IRC, regardless of how many dwellings we land, as far as what the IRC can handle. There have been some suggestions that the middle housing amendments go further than 4 units. Some cities have already done that. We've seen, for example, in an extreme case, the city of Dallas has gone up to 8 dwelling units are now allowed to be constructed under the IRC. We don't anticipate going that far. However, we have heard comments from different constituents and stakeholders to review it, to consider it, and so we're under that analysis. And so that's the update that we have so far. We will have a proposal that is going to the Joint Building Code Committee at their next meeting. Right now, they are scheduled to meet in August. We might convene a meeting before then in order to stay in front of the mandated requirement to get these new middle housing amendments in before the beginning of the year. Because the state statute actually requires that we change our code before January 1st. So we may be convening the Building Code Committee in July. It depends on how fast we can get all of these prepared amendments. So suffice to say, we will have a formal definition for residential coming soon, within the next month or 2 for your consideration.
Thank you. And from what I've learned from the building code side and the fire code side is that part of the issue of adding more units is the fact that the fire department wants the fire sprinkled if they're over a certain amount, but the state requirement is to not have the fire sprinkling. So it's drawing a line to satisfy both sides somehow. I think on the outdoor lighting code side of things, and this is something that we're going to discuss in subcommittee, is the fact that as the lots get smaller, we still might have as many as 4 dwelling units on a fairly small lot. And with less site area, we get less lumens, but there's the need to at least provide a light on the front door and the back door side of each house. And so we have to reconcile that somehow to where we can make enough lumens available for that. On the other hand, the actual tiny house requirement, I think, is only in certain geographical areas near the downtown. If that stays, then it's perhaps less of an issue in outdoor lighting code because we're starting with more allowable lumens anyway, and it won't really be applying in the most sensitive areas like the E1As around the observatories that we'd have to have it. So anyway, that's something that I think us in subcommittee are aware of. Try to work that out. Any other questions or comments on item 4, definitions? Maybe I will add one, which is I believe Amy is actually working on other lighting code related definitions to expand those and make sure we have all of our terms covered in the code.
That's correct. This is Amy. So I went through the code and I highlighted a significant number of terms that we just didn't have definitions for. And then what I did is I put it side by side with the template code for Dark Sky International and looked at where they had definitions that we didn't have. And then have also compared that across codes in 7 other jurisdictions just to see where we were not defining terms up front that could be very useful. For example, what does dark sky means? Excuse me, what does dark sky mean? And then what does light pollution mean? So simple things that we, because we have been doing this for so long as a committee, think should be obvious, are not necessarily obvious in the code, and it can be very helpful to have those terms defined right out the gate.
Clayton?
This is Clayton. May I make a suggestion? While the final draft or next draft is being prepared, perhaps we could publicize our proposed glossary for review by the public and the different constituents to all weigh in on those definitions before the final or the next draft is complete, as a means to, again, keep moving the ball forward. If we could, publish publicly this list of or glossary of defined terms, we might be able to get some consensus at the next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. We have made a number of updates to that glossary in addition to what we are now talking about. So I think it's a really good idea to show everyone how it's changed.
You'll go.
Yeah, this is Buell. I strongly support that idea. Is it possible to put it online in a way that it's easy for people to add comments to the document, not edit it, but put comments? Then people could see, if they wanted to, people could see the comments of others.
This is Clayton. We can definitely look into that. Right now, we have a separate comment form, but that's a great idea to allow everyone to participate in that process. I'm not sure what platform or software would be best for that, so we'll need to confer internally to look into that.
Thanks, and I understand if you can't.
We also have a comment online. Do you want me to read that?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
That's gonna be May Smith. Is anyone considering requiring motion sensors on home lighting and requiring shielding on home lighting? Without motion sensors, we are using wasted electricity most of the night. This is Christina with City of Tucson.
Okay, this is Dennis. Let me weigh in on it. Shielding of the lighting is generally required. Some lighting is not required to be shielded within certain limits. But we already have those requirements. We also have some aiming requirements. And principally, that's going to impact when motion sensor fixtures are used, because the typical motion sensor fixture tends to be an aimable floodlight type fixture that needs to be aimed in a downward direction. So we have requirements for that. We don't actually have a requirement, though, that the lighting be controlled by motion sensors. I think that's something we could debate in our subcommittee work, along with what the total lumen values allowed would be. We did propose that for commercial construction for parking areas and other wide open areas, because there's so much light that comes off from those areas and typically burns all night long when they're mostly vacant. In residential, I I don't know that I personally am not in favor of mandating it because I believe people should have the choice of what they do, but I certainly they're allowed and anyone can make that choice to use them. If any other committee members have opinions on that, we're welcome to hear it. Okay, I guess we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is to set the future agenda items. And the only thing I could think of is perhaps adding an agenda item, say between number 3 and 4, or between 4 and 5, to just be discussion on outdoor lighting code in case we have anything that the members want to bring up and discuss that wasn't otherwise covered by agenda. We're allowed to do that, but I think we should do it that way. Oh, okay.
This is Clayton with the city. We can definitely add that to the agenda to make sure that you have that open discussion forum opportunity. We would also encourage perhaps adding an item specifically to the lumen per acre table so that we can have focused discussion on moving that initiative forward, on completing that table and then getting it open.
Sure.
Public comment.
And I think that would naturally happen through the subcommittee report because I think that's really the focus that hopefully by next meeting, we will have those lumen tables. And so when we get to our subcommittee report, we would go into that, but we could leave it as an agenda item as well.
Amy's got her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. This is Amy Oliver. I think I would appreciate if we did add that next time though as a separate item, the tables, so that we have a very focused discussion time on it. So it's not just a part of the report. I find that if it's something in the report and we open a discussion, then we end up not moving through the rest of the agenda and hitting other things that we need to. So if we can put that in the second half of the agenda, also, if we can make sure that we add going through those new and changed definitions, revised definitions, so that we know that we have a deadline to have these things ready to share in the open committee meeting, then I think that that will also help move things forward and help us set the other deadlines that we need to meet for comments ahead of time. And Clayton, I have a question for you, and Dan, what is the period that we need to, so the subcommittee can work on a timeline to getting things done? What is the time frame that we need to have these documents out again for public comment or for review before an open committee meeting?
Do you have any specified deadlines from
No.
county administration?
No, we don't have any specific guidelines, although published for these items for the stakeholders. I know they would like at least a couple of weeks before the meeting, so we can review it.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, this is Clayton. There have been some loose targets of the end of the year. And like I have not heard anyone set a hard target, but there are people talking about that. The building codes were adopted last night by mayor and council, which means that whole initiative is moving forward, and the 2024 I codes will become effective January 1st. So there will be some initiative, right, to try and line up the change over of one code cycle to the next. I think, January 1st effective date would be a reasonable target. But moving backwards,
Yeah, where does that take us?
that we pretty much have to eliminate December as a functional month because of holidays and people taking time off, which means we would really need to have something completed by November. At the very, very latest, we would move back, another several weeks for coordination. So if we can get a draft out to the public by August, we can most likely meet that end of year target, if that is a target.
Okay, can you, could we get a copy of the building code sent to the committee? Particularly the subcommittee, so that we can make sure that anything we're doing, again, you've, I'm sure noticed this, that we're trying to align put
Copy of-
things together so that we're not creating a conundrum for ourselves.
This is Clayton. I will say that I can post a link in the chat right now to the two web pages where all of those amendments can be found. One web page is where we posted the draft amendments that we've been working on, and then the second web page will be the mayor and council documents of what they actually approved. There are differences, and we haven't posted what got finally approved by mayor and council to the website. So I'm going to post both. Okay. But technically what was approved by mayor and council is going to be on a separate website.
Okay, I mean, that's what I think we need, what actually got approved, so that we know exactly what we need to do to align with it.
Yeah,
And Amy, this is Dennis. I am a member of the Consolidated Joint Building Code Committee, so I'm involved in that process, and I can give you more information on what went on, and I've been trying to look between both committees to see if we would have any issues that would, that one side or the other needs to know about.
Thank you.
and this is Dan, to piggyback off what Clayton said. The county's Planning and Zoning Commission approved the recommended code adoption with the amendments, and we will be taking them to the Board of Supervisors on July 1st, but our implementation date, our effective date will still be January 1st, 2026. We try to align with the city. One thing we do need to keep in mind is the county cannot adopt the lighting code until the city does. So I would follow right after Clayton, as close as I could to Clayton's mayor and council meeting with the Board of Supervisors. So we can.
There could be a short lag though.
Yeah, there will be a short lag for the county's adoption of it. And then Amy, just as a clarification, did you want a copy of the actual codes or just the amendments? If you want the link,
You don't want the code.
just the amendments, because I trust that if there is another anomaly, you will tell us that it is there.
yeah. What I can do is I'll forward Clayton the link to the county's strikeout version of the amendments. Because they are just a little bit different than the cities. They're very similar, but there are a few things that the city requires that the county does not.
To clarify that, and to make the city and county as close as they can be in the building codes. And that's really a benefit to everybody trying to build something, is to not have to have one set of rules one place and a different set of rules someplace else. And so we're lucky that that's really happening. I hear stories of how it is up in Maricopa County, and it's not good up there. I guess we're going to move ahead to the next agenda item, item 6, which is code enforcement. And do we have anyone that wants to speak on that?
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Lori Pumphrey with the Code Enforcement Division of the city. And just to provide some information that was requested from the last meeting, a 5-year report of code cases. So I actually just ran a report today, going back to June 4th, 2020, and we came up with about 323 lighting cases, lighting complaints. That number could be a little different because we did transition to a new software during that time. But for the most part, I think that's correct. And I can provide a list of that if anybody is interested.
This is Clayton with the city. I also want to take an opportunity to thank Lori and her team at Code Enforcement for their diligence in acknowledging lighting considerations, their effort to address some of the constituent comments. They recently hosted a training with their code enforcement inspectors to help educate them on the outdoor lighting code requirements, how it's applied, so forth, which is one of the comments that we've heard previously that, perhaps code enforcement inspectors are not familiar enough with the lighting code, which is why there may be other issues. So again, just want to commend Lori's leadership on moving that training forward and acknowledging those constituent concerns.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments on code enforcement? Hearing none, I'll move ahead to item
You
7.
have a hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Richard Green.
Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, it's Richard Green. I'm just curious, are the majority of those complaints residential light trespass?
Yes, they are. The way I have the list compiled doesn't distinguish, but in my experience, that is correct. And with commercial complaints being in a minority, yes.
You know, I think it would be useful for our subcommittee, if there's a summary of the complaints, to see that and understand the nature of these complaints.
Yeah, I could do that. I'll provide that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move ahead to the next item, which is call to the audience. At this point, if anybody has any comments or questions, you're welcome.
Hi, my name is Kevin Crumwitty. I'm a Tucson resident, and I have a couple of different things that I wanted to mention. I became interested in the lighting code last year because I've noticed an encroachment of light on my property. I'm an amateur astronomer. I like to see animals on my property, and I've just noticed more and more lights appearing around my neighborhood. So that's when I started looking into the lighting code. I appreciate that enforcement has improved. There's still a couple of issues that I think I'm not clear on whether they're being enforced or why it appears to me they're not being enforced. And I haven't spoken to anybody in the city's code enforcement, so I haven't heard their side of this at all. So I want to, yeah. In particular, section 102.4.1, which relates to major additions lighting, especially in cases where there's an established property where there's no lights and then suddenly there's a light. And if there, my reading of the code is that there's a permitting and site plan requirement. If those permits would be visible on Pro, there aren't any permits. And I've reported a number of cases like that were closed as unfounded. The other thing that doesn't seem to be being enforced is color temperature. Section 402. If you read the code, there's no exception for lumens. There's no exception for shielding. If it's above a certain color temperature, it's a violation, period. And that doesn't seem to be being enforced. So that's my reason I attended today. A couple other things related to other points that were brought up. Definition wise, the
Looks like they started to do it. It took forever. It was, it's just like the top.
Can you mute, please?
Sorry for the
Okay.
interruption. Go ahead.
No problem. The code uses the term adjacent property often, which isn't defined, and it might be you know, I don't know if that could be used to dismiss complaints. If you're like 2 doors down, can you file a complaint? That may be something that needs to be addressed in the code. And I think the aiming requirement for spotlights is a little bit vague. I don't know exactly how that's being interpreted, but I don't know if that refers to like the center axis of the light or the edge of the light. It's not clear to me. That's all I have. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I do have one more thing. With regard to motion sensors, I haven't looked at if there's been a recent draft of the new code, but I did like the provision in one of the earlier drafts about an exception for motion sensors. I think that would be great. I really agree with the idea that residential lighting should be encouraged to be on motion sensors. And maybe that could be made more attractive by waiving some of the total lumen limits or the individual light lumen limits, as long as it's on a motion sensor that's not sensitive outside your property.
Thank you. I'll comment back and say that I think that is a good idea. However, I think a great number of light trespass issues have to do with motion sensor lights, and the color temperature issues have to do with that, because there are so many commercially available products that can either be bought in person or bought online and mailed in that don't meet our color temperature. And they tend to be glare bomb type fixtures that put way too much light out. The real problem here is getting people to get a permit to put their lighting in. Because if you apply for the permit, there's a process in place where the inspections will happen and the lighting will be better. The people that don't get permits, I think they simply don't know any better.
Right.
And it's relatively easy to change out a light fixture. If you're at all handy, you can do that. And you think you're improving your property, and you just don't know what the ramifications are on other people. So that becomes an education piece. And with respect to the code enforcement, I don't believe there's any proactive enforcement on the part of the city as someone going out looking for violations. It starts with complaints.
Right.
So if there isn't a complaint made, I don't think anything's going to get investigated.
Right. That's why I just started filing a few complaints just to kind of test the system. The first one was in August of 2024. It took 5 months for somebody to come out and tell me it wasn't a violation. I happened to meet Rick Hollander, who reopened the case, determined it was a violation, got it resolved. The others I reported, maybe 4 others. They were resolved within a week, but most of them were closed as unfounded. And again, with the major additions, the permitting requirement, if the intention of that is just to act as a little bit of a speed bump, a little deterrent to just going to Home Depot and putting a light on your house, that is not working and it's not being enforced.
Thank you. This is Clayton with the City of Tucson. I just want to acknowledge your comments. Thank you. They've been heard. I think this plays well into the training efforts of code enforcement to bring their staff up to speed. One of the comments that I heard from some of the code enforcement inspectors was their lack of ability to distinguish color temperature, for example. Like how would they measure color temperature in the field, and how would they identify those different potentially compliant or non-compliant scenarios. So that is something that the code enforcement division is still working through, working on, and I know that they're also working on the complaint form. To address your comment on adjacent, technically anybody can file a complaint. So you do not need to be a directly adjacent property to file a complaint, but also based on the fact that the city's code enforcement division is a finite resource. The more complaints that they get, the longer it potentially could take for them to respond. based on the volume that they're experiencing at any given time.
And they're dealing with complaints that are all over the place. It's not just lighting, and some things are, you know, real hazards to life in some cases, so. I think we must triage them in some way. Do we have any other?
Well, I have a question. This is Buell. But can someone comment about the permitting? It seems like if someone puts up a light without a permit, how is that not a valid complaint?
This is Clayton with the city. This is a recurring comment that we've heard over the past couple of months, and request for clarification of what requires a permit. The most recent case I can describe is a question of low voltage wiring, because low voltage wiring is exempt in the building code. But yet, if that low voltage wiring supplies outdoor lights, the outdoor light requires a permit. So it is the most restrictive code that applies. And in this case, the outdoor lighting code specifically says if you add outdoor light, you're required to have a permit to do it. So that would preempt any exemption for low voltage or say solar powered light. Okay. Technically, if someone goes to Home Depot and buys a bunch of solar powered lights and sticks them in their yard, and they code, they could receive a ticket because they've now added light, even though it doesn't use electricity and the building codes don't even address solar lighting. So from our perspective, this is an education awareness issue, as Dennis brought up, that we are proactively looking at how to address that, to inform the public, make sure that those rules and regulations are clear, and also how to supplement code enforcement's activities so that when they do issue a notice of violation to a non-compliant property, there's actually some handout material that they can provide to those property owners to help them understand what the codes state.
Lori.
Yeah, sorry, my mouse is acting up, so it's turning on and off. Thank you, Clayton, for all of that. And I would just add that, yes, in the past, we've had a certain discretion on how and when we enforce, and we enforce a wide variety of codes. We've had limitations, of course, on staffing and then in general number of complaints we receive. But moving forward, we are educating ourselves and look forward to enforcing this in a much more effective manner and also in a more timely manner.
This is Dennis. Lori, I have a question. When you get a complaint and you would send someone out, then the first contact it's generally just a letter that's a notice to the property owner. Is that correct?
Right. We issue a notice of violation if we identify a violation, and then we would cite the code that is involved. You know, no matter what type of violation it is, we give a time frame for abatement, conduct a follow-up, you know, as well as educating the owner or responsible party, give an extension if necessary, or if the violation is not abated, we may write a ticket or go to court. But most of the time, it is taken care of.
That's the sense I get, is that very rarely it doesn't go that far, that usually the letter gets it started. And sometimes complaints are about things that are still code compliant, in which case they can't go any further.
This is Clayton. I'll reiterate and support that. The cases that I've been involved in where property owners have come to planning and development services and they say, hey, I've got this notice of violation for my light. It's really a matter of how to solve that issue. And it rarely advances to citation or court ordered actions, because once they get that notice of violation, then they're actively involved in finding a way to bring that lighting in compliance. It's really crossing that threshold of, making the property owner aware that they have a non-compliant situation, and then, you know, directing them to correct it, or further action would be taken.
Very good. Do we have any other comments?
Nobody online.
Hearing none, our last agenda item is adjournment. So, motion. Chairman, Daniel.
Dennis, sorry, one quick question. This is Buell. I just want to confirm we are meeting a month from now, right? Or we're continuing the monthly meetings?
Yes, this
Okay.
is Clayton. We are scheduled to meet in July. However, if we don't think that we will have a quorum because of, you know, out of town visits or what have you, then we should definitely address that.
Okay, and the subcommittee is going to try and keep meeting, right?
I think our intent is to do so before the next meeting and hopefully have the lumen tables resolved at that time.
Great.
Kurt's off town though, I think at least another week. So,
And I know the subcommittee did talk about potentially canceling the July meeting, but like there was no decision. That is a decision that would need to be made here.
Well, we didn't talk about canceling it, rather moving it, because a number of people will be gone. The next meeting is, sorry, this is Amy, tentatively scheduled for the 2nd of July. And so it sounded like a number of people will be away. I will be away. Craig will be away.
so that being said, I don't know if anybody's got ideas of a better date, but it probably does make sense to move away from the holiday. That would be more like the day one.
So I'd welcome staff suggesting a date that's convenient for them and we adjust.
Yeah, this is Alec. Can we send out another survey of dates and we can vote on it?
Good idea.
We certainly can. Thank you for the suggestion. I'd be happy to set that up. We have Dan Ice is going to be out the week after the holiday weekend. And I will be out the week after that for an ASBO annual business meeting. So you don't need both of us or either of us. We can have folks attend in our absence. So if you would like, we can send out a doodle poll for both the 2 weeks following the holiday. Okay, we'll make that happen.
Great. I think that'll help us. Okay, so I'm still looking for a second to adjourn.
I second.
Who was the
Same.
first one?
It was Daniel.
Thank you. So meeting adjourned at 1:46 PM.